okay, my bed is a mess, and looking out the window, it kind of looks like it's gonna rain, but we're not gonna let this stop us. Let's go on a blind date with a book. Happy Lover's Day. It's kind of dark in here because like it's just like so gloomy outside, and it didn't say it was supposed to rain today, and I'm like, come on. But happy Lover's Day, because by the time I post this, it will be Valentine's Day. So I love Valentine's Day. I just love. I've never gotten a blind date with a book before because, well, for the primary reason of, to be honest, I'm scared of getting a book that like, not even like I get it and I don't end up liking it, because that's like just a whole leap with getting a blind date with a book. Like you take the risk of maybe like you see what it says on the front and then maybe you open it, maybe you don't like, after you read it you don't like it. But my bigger fear is that like getting it and then seeing like all the things on the front and being like, oh okay, like this is a book I'm gonna really enjoy, and opening it and being it's a book I've read before and like hated. Please don't let that happen. Even if it's a book I get, I'm being like so pessimistic, but I'm like, even if it's a book I get and like I don't like, it's like potato, like I took that risk. I just don't want it to be a book that like I've read before, you know? I'm being much more intentional this year, as I feel like I have been in like previous years, with like only buying physical copies of books that I've read before. That doesn't mean like when I go into like a bookstore, like I like vehemently like stop myself from like getting anything else. I'm like, I'll treat myself to like another book or two like I haven't read before, but it's just so much more satisfying when I read books usually through like ebook reader, like Libby, like my library. To have a book on your shelf that you know like you really enjoyed. Nothing wrong with like, you know, a mediocre like book or two, but I just find like putting my money towards that just like makes me feel happy. I don't really know where I was going with that in consideration of blind date with the book. I'm debating if I'm gonna do my makeup. I feel like I say that like every vlog, I'm like, should I do my makeup, should I not? And then I sometimes end up, sometimes not. But I just think it's the always like having to take it off part that I'm like, and paired with the fact that I feel like I'm like breaking out. I don't really think makeup will help that right now. Maybe I'll just put on some like of my pinkier lip gloss. But anywho, this is the top I'm going to be wearing. I just want to wear something very like Valentine's Day-y, and I think I'm going to pair it with like my pink or white sneakers, and then, you know, my classic good old faithful. She never fails me. I wear these jeans like a lot. And I recently did laundry, and so they're all clean. But yeah, let me go get dressed, and I'm trying to think about what jewelry. Maybe like my heart. My hair is stuck on my earring. So let's get into it. No more procrastinating. Sorry. You guys know, of course, that like I had to put my camera in the cabinet so you guys could like see me open it, but I just feel like I love that transition. You guys have seen it a couple of times on my channel if you've been here before. But I went into the bathroom because my room was just getting a little dark lighting wise. I'm not a biggest fan of yellow light, but hey, we move. It's not the end of the world. But this is the outfit. You guys can't see the full thing. You'll probably catch the full thing like when I'm in the store, but it's just so pinky and so cute. And I changed my jeans into, they're more like a little bit more high-waisted and like not as wide, like they're more like narrow, just because like I had to change aspects of the fit to make it work. Like also this top is so much tinier than I remember it being, and so I had to put something underneath. Got my jewelry on, if you guys can see. I made this one myself, and then I got these ones from Claire's, and oops, my glasses. I'm going to be wearing my pink Converse probably because I just feel like it matches really well with this side. And then it's getting kind of, well, it's not getting kind of dark, but you know, it is like past 5, so you don't want to get there too late. And I also, I don't know, I'm so particular. I don't like to drive in the dark. I like driving in too sunny. I only started driving like within the past, like really driving within the past like yearish. Girls who are scared to drive or get their driver's license, I understand you. I had it for the longest time because I got my permit through driver's ed in high school, and then I got my driver's license because it was just like the best form of ID to get before going to college. Like I didn't want to carry my passport everywhere just to prove I was my age. But then even between then, I didn't drive because I didn't have a car. There was like public transportation, there was like the train, the bus. And so it wasn't until I came home after college that like I really pedaled to the metal. So if anybody's like, driving felt like really integral to like adulthood for some reason when I was younger. Every step I moved further in adulthood, but like didn't drive, it made me feel like really insecure. So to anybody who like isn't driving yet, in your 20s, early 20s like me, do not worry, it'll come when it comes. But I would recommend to everybody who does have the opportunity or can to learn. It is like a sense of just being able to do things on your own. I love going on like running errands with people, but just being able to like hop in your car and like go wherever you want is like a beautiful thing. And so I just love this little purse too. It's my mom's, but she lets me use it. Or maybe I use it once and I never really give back. But time to go get our blind date with the book. I'm more excited the more I'm talking about it, not just because of the blind date with the book, but also just because I've never been to this bookstore before. And so it's gonna be like a bookstore tour plus like blind date with the book. Let's go. I'm also trying not to like just rot in bed like after my 9 to 5. I work from home like I told you guys before. Even though I was on that trip, I usually work from home, and when I sign off I usually just like lay in bed, I scroll on TikTok, I take a nap, I wake up way too late after that nap, I have dinner, and then I fall back asleep. And so I'm trying to like do proactive things, and so this is part of that. So let's go. Also, my mom came home from work too, and she said my outfit is really cute, so I'm like, let's go. It and I parked. I was a little confused at first. I've never been to this area before, and there was some construction happening in the area, so I was like, I'm going to walk around the corner and then I should be able to find what I'm looking for. And so let's go. I'm just browsing because I found the book that I think I want to get. I'm taking a risk on it. It sounds kind of sad. But the other book I know is like Things We Never, I know the other romance is Things We Never Got Over, and I'm not getting that one. But now I'm looking at their selection. It's a used bookstore, and they actually have like fairly recent books. They have Bride, so I'm also going to get that. Terrible lighting. But I just came out of the bookstore. I was gonna do the like veiling of the book in my car because I'm like super duper curious. I was saying, I keep laughing, but as I was reading through the description of like the other romance book, because I wanted a romance for the blind date, you know, just because it's Valentine's Day. Most times you go to blind dates with a book at the bookstores I've seen that, Barnes & Noble, it's usually a romance. So I was actually kind of surprised that they had like other genres, which actually that was really nice. So they had like an adult fantasy, there was like literary fiction, which I was like, that's actually really nice, just like if you don't want a romance but you still want a blind date with a book. But I know like of course like I've seen like Etsy shops that do that, but usually when it comes to like Barnes & Noble, I usually see like it's romance blind date with a book. Anywho, I just came out of the store, but let's go home because I want to unbox this. You guys saw the description. It seems like it's on the sadder side, and they're also used books, which I didn't know. The blind date with the book is also a used book, which I think is like nice. If you saw in the store, it seems like they have a mix of like used, but also like a small section for like newer books. Like you guys saw, they have like You Again, the new Tia Williams book, which I was thinking about getting, but at the same time I'm like, I just can't, I don't think I'll ever be able to justify myself unless I like deeply love a book, getting it immediately in like hardcover. Like you guys saw, I got Bride, and I got, actually let me just show you guys. I got Bride and I got The Blind Date with a Book, which it says, two best friends attempt to face their fear of, I had to turn on the car also, you guys will hear like it humming, but like it was kind of cold. Romance, two best friends attempt to face their fear of love after their friend's death. The real girl to learn to love themselves. This is they also put the Goodreads star rating, which I thought was nice, interesting. Even though this seems on the sadder side, I'm like, I'm curious. I'm just like curious. Oh, and I guess this was basically all to say that like Things We Never Got Over, the Goodreads rating I think is like a 4.2. So I was like, I'm not really gonna go off of that because that's, and your reading is subjective and everything, but that rating is so high and I didn't enjoy that book, so I'm like, anything can happen. But let's go home so I can unwrap this because I'm just as curious as you guys to be. Like I genuinely have like no idea what this is, so let's go. Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear my mom singing in the background, but if you hear somebody singing, it's my mom. First, we're gonna eat. She got me a patty, which I'm so thankful for. Because on the way I was hungry and I was like, oh, but I don't feel like stopping, so I'm gonna keep home. I forgot I had this that she got me earlier. But yeah, first course of action, I got into some sweatpants and like my sweatshirt because it looked very cute, but it was time to just change into something comfier. It's also like the evening before you guys saw me. It was like Well, basically the evening nearby. It's like more like late afternoon. But if anybody has any guesses before I open it, if you're watching this video, like please put it in the comments, and then I guess like return to it like later and see if you're right. I'm just like curious because I used to love when I went to like Barnes and Noble and was looking through the blind dates for the book. I would look through and be like, can I guess like what this is? But the thing is, they never really had blurbs like these ones had like kind of like the vague synopsis like of the book, like different parts, like for things we never got over. It was like in a small town, and what tuned me into it was like, because at the first like runs away from a wedding, I was like, did that happen in the book? I can't remember. But then when it was like sister steals her car, I was like, okay, yeah, that's that book. Those had like synopsis blurbs, but for Barnes and Noble it was usually just like very like it was much vaguer. Like I could never guess what it was. So let me finish this and then we'll open it. Okay, it's time to unwrap. No, I've never read this before. Okay guys, this is the book. I'm just like, I've read it before, thank God. What has Kristen Higgins written before? That name sounds super duper familiar. Let me look up really quickly. What has Kristen Higgins written? She wrote Pack Up the Moon. I have seen people like, I mean, the synopsis alone of that book sounds like super duper sad. I think it's about, I think it flows between the past and the present of a husband whose wife passes away because of cancer, and then the present is like him trying to move on after that, but like he can't because she was like the love of his life. This is the same author. Okay, let me read the synopsis, because before, so this is what originally, you guys can know, just like the front said. Romance, two best friends attempt to face their fear of love after their friend's death. The real goal, to learn to love themselves. And I had a 4.1 star rating on Goodreads. This is what the synopsis reads. Okay, we just read the whole thing from the start. New York Times bestselling author Kristen Higgins is beloved for her heartfelt novels filled with humor and wisdom. Now in her newest novel, Good Luck With That, she tackles issues every woman deals with, body image and self-acceptance, and takes you on a journey with two women ready to wrestle low self-esteem to the ground and leave it there. Emerson, Georgia, and Marley have been best friends ever since they met at a weight loss camp as teens. When Emerson tragically passes away, she leaves one final wish for her best friends, to conquer the fear they still carry as adults. For each of them, that means something different. For Marley, it is coming to terms with the survivor's guilt she has carried around since her twin sister's death, which has left her blind to the real chance for romance in her life. For Georgia, it is learning to stop trying to live up to her mother's and brother's ridiculous standards and learn to accept the love her ex-husband has tried to give her. But as Marley and Georgia grow stronger, the real meaning of Emerson's dying wish becomes truly clear. More than anything, she wanted her friends to love themselves. A novel of compassionate insight, Good Luck With That, tells the story of two women who learn to embrace themselves just the way they are. Ooh, but when this is about friendship, and then it's also about love. And also it's about like women finding themselves, which I love. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna start this immediately. This is cover so you guys can see. And I'm not gonna jump into it immediately. I do have the day off from work tomorrow, actually, the day I'm filming this video. And so I may start it then, but if I feel incentivized, I may just start it like in like an hour or two. I just want to, I didn't finish eating that long ago, so I just kind of want to settle myself. But I am just flipping through it, not reading anything, but flipping through it. It seems like one chapter is Marley and another chapter, like it's dual POV first person. How many pages is it? Ooh, seems like it's 400-ish. Oh, 450, so not even 400-ish, 450. And I think this is nice because then if I really enjoy this, then I will read Pack Up the Moon. I knew this name sounded familiar for some reason. Okay, well that was that. Let's take a break and we'll come back. Okay guys, let's talk about my blind date with a book, Good Luck with That by Kristen Higgins. If you guys saw it in like the little montage I slipped in here, I went to Virginia with my mom for a quick road trip over the weekend, and that's primarily when I read this book, when I was in the passenger seat or when we were in our hotel room. I finished it pretty quickly. It's about 450-ish pages, but I found myself flying through it pretty quickly, which I always say is like a surprise to myself, but I'm like, Diva, I feel like sometimes I'm like, when it comes to physical books, they can feel like really, I found danged. When it feels to physical books, they can feel really daunting. But once I get immersed in them, start reading them, I'm like, Diva, you just have to like keep with the pace. So the book follows Emerson, Georgia, and Marley, 3 friends who met when they were teenagers at Camp Copperbrook, which is a weight loss camp for young girls and teenagers who are fat. The story starts with Emerson's tragic death, and she leaves in her wake a list for Marley and Georgia to follow, basically things they promised they would do. I say in quotes because the title was always in quotes in the book. Things they promised they would do when they were skinny, she wants them to do now. They're all in like their early 30s, which I like reading about women's fiction about women who are in their space of this life, because I feel like, especially maybe it's just like being in my 20s, I feel like a lot of people have this view of like transitioning into your 30s being like, your life is over, like you're like decrepit. And so I just like reading about like nuanced stories about like women at that time in their life. That's a sidebar though. But it follows them, and basically for each of them that means something different. For Marley, it is coming to terms with the survivor's guilt she has carried around since her twin sister's death. That is a big part of Marley's story. Her twin sister Frankie died when they were 4, and that has kind of shaped a lot of like Marley's life, the twin who like didn't die, which has left her blind to a real chance for romance in her life. For Georgia, it is about learning to stop trying to live up to her mother and brother's ridiculous standards and learn to accept the love her ex-husband has tried to give her. This is gonna be like spoilery. I feel like at a certain point I'm gonna say like when I'm gonna start talking about spoilers, because there are things kind of I just like want to walk through. I feel like that can't be maybe like properly conveyed if I like don't specifically touch on them, but I will say so you guys don't feel spoiled. But as Marley and Georgia grow stronger, the real meaning of Emerson's dying wish becomes truly clear. More than anything, she wanted her friends to love themselves. First things I liked about this book, the writing is strong here. I feel like a lot of the reviews here, like from other authors, is like praising Kristen Higgins' like emotional writing, really getting you to like deeply connect with the characters, and I think that did happen here. I feel like I know her best commercially for Pack Up the Moon, which I've never read, but like for people, it's people have cried while reading it, which can be different things, but I think at the heart of it is that like she really knows how to like get people like in touch with feeling for the characters, and I do think that was true here. I also didn't know how I was going to end up like feeling about like the perspectives of the story, like the switching back and forth. I expected it to like switch over, but you know, sometimes when that happens, especially when there's 3-ish main characters, the story definitely, I say 3-ish because the story definitely follows Marley and Georgia. At the beginning of the story, Emerson has passed away, so we get snippets of her life and her story through diary flashbacks. At first I was a little worried that like Marley and Georgia were sounding too similar to me, which is like my first thing when just like alternating POVs. Not like this is necessarily the fault of alternating POVs, it's more so just like a testament to like poor characterization and poor writing if the characters end up sounding the same just because you're using I statements. But that didn't happen here. I feel like as the story progressed, by the first couple of chapters after I read those, I began to like distinguish Georgia and Marley like for their personalities and like who they were. So that's what I feel like I definitively enjoyed. And I say definitively because I am kind of at a loss at where personally to rate this book, which is why I feel like I'm just like talking through my thoughts about it, because to the other things where I feel like this book line of lies murky for me is, first, there are, unless I'm still missing them, there are no content or trigger warnings, which I feel like there should have been for this book. This book isn't a light read by any means, which I didn't necessarily expect going into the book, because like the rapper literally said like 2 friends like in the wake of their friend's death. I knew there was going to be some kind of like talks about like grief, like there was going to be an emotional like heaviness to it that I was expecting. However, and I know the journey, like this book says, she tackles Kristen Higgins' issues every woman deals with body image and self-acceptance, low self-esteem. However, I do think this book still should have had content warnings for fat phobia, stark conversations about disordered eating, bulimia, and mentions of SA and molestation. Not necessarily graphic, but to the point enough that I was like, I do feel like this should have been in a content warning. Like I was saying, the journey to like body acceptance is never going to be like necessarily like an easy one, like littered with like rose petals. So like I wasn't expecting that at all, but more so the conversations that the characters like have about themselves they're all fat at like varying weights. It's never like specified in the book, which I feel like was an intentional choice that is like talked about like in the reader's guide and asked like the reader like how they felt about that. Except Emerson, there are like numerical values in relation to her weight. I think at the end of the day, I'm just like a little, not necessarily confused, but just like stuck in the middle about like what this book was trying to accomplish. Star rating wise, I feel like I'm at like a tentative 3 right now. Is that for all that I felt like connected to the characters, like immersed in this story, in the grand scheme of, I looked up this book, apparently it was very controversial at the time of its release, and I can see why, because to be like firmly just promoted as like body positivity, like self-acceptance, I can see like when then reading the book it's kind of like mostly because trying to convey and write about a conversation in consideration to like body positivity while at the same time this book is very much like on the chick lit side. I say that to say like when women's fiction I feel like definitely takes a more like trying to be lighthearted, like romance, like that kind of turn. There's just like a lot to wade through, especially when the characters in this book have struggled with weight their entire lives. I think this book takes a both like stark and endearing approach to like topics that are difficult to wade through and talk about and are very sensitive, such as like weight, but also just about like not being necessarily like where you want to be in life, which I think that's more in the grand scheme of like the characters in their like early 30 somethings. Georgia is, we learn, like divorced at the beginning of the book. The blurb makes like light of this, which is what I'm going to talk about like in my spoilery part of it, is like her mother and her brother don't just have like ridiculous standards, they're like mean as shit. Like mean as shit, which like Georgia talks about like growing up with, she becomes like accustomed to. But I do feel like on the back of the book it could have been like emotionally abusive, because especially in consideration to her brother, like that's what it is. And Marley, for all that she has like a loving family, she's a chef, she has like a fairly successful career as that, like working out of her home, she's lonely, she is like an on and off relationship with one of the firefighters that her brother works with, and it's kind of clear, maybe not to Marley but to Georgia, that like he is very much kind of like playing her. And now we're gonna get to like the spoilery, like I think feel like in-depth like spoilery bits. Like the other parts are talking about like Georgia's divorce, I really just feel like that's kind of like the bare bones without like actually kind of like wading into like things that if you want to read the book like you feel like you'll be spoiled about. Like this is it. This book at its heart, women's fiction, chick lit, but I do feel like there's threads of romance in here. Like definitely the romances, like I didn't really like how they played out throughout the story. Marley's situation, love romantic wise, is that she's in like a situationship, you would say. I think it's been over the course like the past couple years, it's been a while, with a firefighter I said who works with her brother, like Dante. She very much like wants him to be her boyfriend. He's very much like pretending to be clueless, actually clueless. We come to learn at the end of the book that like he's just like an asshole. And so she's kind of at that awkward like stage in her life. And in her role as a chef, she has like a meal delivery service, which is basically what she does. She cooks meals, and like her mother helps her brother helps her, delivering meals to like the wealthy people of like the town that they live in. And one of her clients is Will Harding, who turns out to be her love interest. I could see this like coming from a mile away, especially in the beginning when she was like, he seems creepy, he's always like staring. Like there was just way too much information about him to like not have like a big role in the story. It's not necessarily about that, like why I didn't like it just because it was coming from a mile away, but more so because this is in part to like the book trying to tackle a lot. We learn that Will, he's agoraphobic and he has PTSD because he was in a mass shooting at the last company he worked in. If it was in the South, if I remember correctly, and that is a lot within itself. At the end of the story, as Marley is going to Will's house, she like overhears his parents like in his house like talking to him, and he kind of rebuffs like any them being like, are you seeing anybody, things like that, and he says like no, like starkly, which Marley takes to mean like after kind of going through the situationship, men who have kind of just like taken advantage of her in her time, that he is kind of the same. He doesn't really want to be with her. She's upset about this. It is also her birthday, if I remember correctly, if it's not like the next day, and it's also the birthday of her passed away twin Frankie. She kind of gives him an ultimatum, which is basically like you have to come to this birthday party, like step out of the house, like we can't keep like just like living in like this box. And he's basically like no, like no. I just felt like this was like deeply unfair of Marley. Will himself talks about also how he feels like he's not like progressing mentally, emotionally, like at the rate he wants to since like the mass shooting. But like in that mass shooting, he lost like 3 of his friends, I think one of which was like his best friend, and he was like barricaded in a room like protecting I think his pregnant like supervisor or co-worker. Extremely traumatic. And while yes, Marley, I was like, you want him to be with you. I was also like, I just kind of feel like this is a very unfair, like, if this doesn't happen. I understood for Marley, like, this is maybe what she needed in her life. This is what she needed in the moment. But I was like, maybe it just doesn't need to be with Will then. Like, he's not the, like, only man in the world. Instead, he shows up at the end, like, at her, like, parents' house being like, I want to be with you. Will you marry me? We learned, like, in the chapters after that, like, it's gonna be, like, a prolonged, like, engagement probably. But I was like, cut the show. Like, cut the show. It just felt very, the way the character will be happy at the end of the story is by being married. But I was like, I feel like we definitely could have done some kind of, like, he's committing to her in, like, some other kind of way. Like, he showed up for her, which in itself was, like, a big step. Like, I just feel like that romance was, like, completely unconvincing by the end. I feel like they really got me with the chemistry, like, in the beginning, but by the end I was like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I didn't want them to end up at the end of the story. They do. The last couple pages is him, like, standing in front of her house, them, like, reconciling. They've been divorced for 5 years. It goes into the book that a large part of Georgia, like, hated herself. She hated the way she looked. She still struggles with disordered eating, and she very much was, like, during the first year of their marriage. I think what bothered me about this relationship is that George's family, we can call it microaggressive, they're, like, racist towards Raphael. He, like, laughs it off, so do he and Georgia, but during their, like, last argument during their marriage, when, like, Georgia says, like, stuff she doesn't mean, she recognizes that, like, she was just trying to, like, hurt him. He says, like, you've been talking to other people, and she's like, oh, are you playing, like, the jealous husband, like, Latin card? And I was like, in that part, I just felt like we then never address again. I know people say the things they don't mean during arguments, but taking into a fact that, like, her family was racist, the idea that, like, George is supposed to be, like, separate than that. Like, you know, like, her family is always, like, treating her like the other. But, like, when she said that during the conversation, and then, like, they never, I guess because they were getting divorced, like, what was the point of, like, mentioning it? But on this whole, like, redemption arc that they have, him suddenly, like, being in close capacity to her again, I was just kind of like, are we not going to touch on that again? And that just felt very much one of those things where I was like, this feels like a blind spot, and I thought it was weird that it was never brought up again. To be fair, Raphael does, like, rebuff her, like, when she apologizes for, like, the second time. He's just like, I don't know if I can, like, do this again. But at the very end of the story, they end up together, and I was like, so this is all to say, this was my experience with my blind date with a book. My first one, definitely an interesting one. I think I went into this thinking that, not into the book, but kind of this whole situation, thinking that I was going to find, like, some, like, fluffy rom-com and talk about that with you guys, and that's not what this was. And so by the time this video is posted, it will be Valentine's Day, and so I hope everybody has a good Lover's Day, and I hope that everybody else tries out a blind date with a book at some point in their life.